Masechet Nedarim Daf Kaf Zayin. In the middle of the page, we begin with the Mishnah of the fourth and last category of vows that are void. And this is Nidre Onasin, a vow in which there is a circumstance beyond one's control. Ones, he was not able to fulfill it. Here's a few examples. Hidiro chavero sheyochal etzlo, vechalahu o shechala beno o shikebo nahar, hare elu nidre onasin. A certain host makes a vow to his friend and says, "You better come over for dinner tomorrow night, or else I'm never talking to you again." And fine, they agree. But then the guest gets sick, or his son gets sick and he's not able to make it, or he's trying to make it, but there's a traffic jam. The boat is not going and he can't get over the river, and so for circumstances beyond his control, he's not able to make it for dinner. And so does that vow, is it binding? And now they can never talk to each other again? And the answer is no, that's an honest. When the host made the vow, the point was to encourage the guest to make sure that he's really going to come, and with threat of, you better come or else. But he never meant to make this prohibition should there be a circumstance beyond his control, and therefore, since we know that that's what he meant, the vow is null and void, even though the person did not actually come. Okay, from the fact that it includes both a person is sick or his son is sick, right? That means it's not an absolute impossible. It's possible he could leave his son there and come, find someone else to take care of his son, but it means it's really difficult for him to come, and but otherwise he intended to and was planning to and would have come. That's called nidre onasin. All right, the Gemara is going to compare it to some other cases. Hahu gabra tatpis zachvata bebedina v'amar ila atena al telatin yomin libatlun hane zachvatai. A certain person, he had a court case with someone else, an argument over whatever property or money, and he has some documents in his favor, and so he takes the documents and gives them to the court. Right, here are the documents, but he's not ready to finish the court case yet. Maybe he wants to go find some other evidence, or he has to go home for whatever reason. And he says, but listen, I'm going to come back, right? Don't worry. And in fact, to guarantee the fact that he's going to return, he says, if I don't return before 30 days and complete the arguments, the court case, then these documents that I'm giving to you that are proof in my favor should be null and void, right? I'll basically give up my side of the case if I don't come back within 30 days. So the court and the other side are happy. Okay, they agreed to it. Now what happens is itnis velata. And in the end, he wanted to come back, but there was an ones. He got sick. He was not able to come back, but he really wanted. He was intending to through no fault of his own. So what happens? Machloket. Amar Rav Huna batel zachvate. Amar le Rava anusu ve'anus rachamana patre. Tichtiv la'anara lo ta'aseh davar. Rav Huna on the one end says that since he made this condition, if I don't come back, then these documents will be null and void, and he didn't come back, so the documents are void, right? That's exactly what he said. So too bad on him, and he should have been, even though it was circumstances beyond his control. We look at the letter of the law, and he did not fulfill his condition. Whereas Rava says, no, this is different. In this case, it's beyond his control, ones, and we have a principle that when someone is anus, when he's forced, then Rachamana gives him a clean slate, his patur. Now, and he's not responsible, not liable if it's done because of circumstances beyond your control. Where do we learn that from? It's from a case of rape. A man rapes a woman, so the man will get punished, but the woman will not get punished because the Torah there compares it to a victim of murder, right? Would you say that a victim of murder should be guilty for something? Obviously not. So too, a woman who is raped, unlike what other people used to think in ancient Near Eastern times, that they might give a punishment to both. The Torah says no. If a person is forced anus, then they are not liable. And we apply that here also. The person wanted to come back, and he was forced for some reason beyond his control and could not return to the court. Therefore, his condition is not valid, and he can keep those court documents still in play. All right, so that's the machloket. Now, here's where we're bring in the Mishnah as a challenge to Rava. V'chitema ketala shaneh v'hatenan nidre onasin hidiro chavero she'ochales lo v'chalahu o shechala beno o shikebo nahar hare elu nidre onasin. If you will object to Rava's proof and say that the death penalty is different, see, Rava's proof from this Nara Lota Sedavar is in talking about in context Nara Me'orasa, a woman who has already had done Kiddushin. In that case, if she willingly commits adultery with someone else, then they get the death penalty, both she and the adulterer that she is with. And so because of that, that's a very serious punishment. And maybe you'd say, only in that case, when it's beyond her control, if she's raped, then she does not get a punishment, because otherwise she's going to get the death penalty. But perhaps if it's only monetary, then even if it's something beyond one's control, like in this case where he was not able to come back before 30 days, and so he's going to lose his monetary case by giving up those documents, maybe we would not apply this principle of anus rachamana patre, right? Maybe we only excuse from liability someone in a death penalty because of onus, but not in a monetary case. So if you should say that, well then I will bring a further proof for Rava from our very Mishnah that says nidre onasin, if someone takes a vow where the circumstances end up being beyond one's control, like the host says, you better come to me, or else, right, we cannot ever eat over again, or I'll be prohibited to you, and he gets sick, or his son gets sick, or the river is blocking and he can't get over. This is called nidre onasin, and this is not the death penalty. It doesn't say I'm going to kill you or if you don't come. It will only have social, monetary consequences, and even so, we say that ones rachamana patre, that when he made a vow and ended up being beyond one's control to fulfill it, then the vow is null and void. So we see that even in non-death penalty cases, we do apply this principle, and so this would be a good proof for Rava and an answer to anyone who would object. Okay, but now we have another question to Rava from another Mishnah in Masechet Gitin. Rava, Maishana Meha. How would our case here be different with our case with the 30 days, where Rava says that he's honest and that's a good excuse? How is that different from the following Mishnah Ditnan? Harezikitech marshavim lobati mikan ad shenem asar chodesh. Umet betoch shenem asar chodesh harezeget. The Mishnah rules that if person he's going to go away on a trip, and he doesn't just in case he doesn't come back for whatever reason, he's captured or he dies or whatever, he gets lost. He doesn't want his wife to be in aguna, and so he says here, I'm giving you a get from now if in case I don't return within 12 months, right? So that way, if he does return safe and sound, then the get is null, and so they remain married. And if he doesn't show up before 12 months, no matter what happens to him, she is then divorced from now, and that way she can go and is free to marry anyone she wants. And now what happened is he died within the 12 months. That is a valid get, because right once that 12-month mark comes, he's not coming back. He's long dead, and so the condition is triggered. Or rather is not triggered, because he doesn't come back, and so because he doesn't come back, the get it is triggered, and the get is a valid get. Okay, that's the Mishnah. And we ask, Amai v'hame'an me'nas itnis? Isn't this beyond his control? There's nothing, no bigger excuse than, I'm sorry I didn't come back. I was dead at the time. So obviously he didn't come back, but it was certainly beyond his control. So why don't we say it was beyond his control, so it wasn't his fault, but otherwise, had he been alive, he certainly would have been there, and therefore we should say that the condition is null and void, and therefore the get should not be valid. How come, Rava? How come you don't take into account here his honest status? And the answer is, Amre dilma shanehatam dihava yadat demit min le'altarava gamir ve'yahib gita. No, in that case, he wanted the get to be valid. And in fact, had he known that he was going to die within that year, he would have given the get immediately in order to save her from Yibum. He had some awful brother that surely she would not want to marry, and he would give her a hard time, and he wanted to save his wife from such a mess. And therefore, he certainly wanted to give her a get, had he known that he was never going to come back because he was going to die. And so therefore, in this case, it really depends on his intention, a person's intention. That's precisely why he gave her a get with this condition. If I don't come back, for whatever reason, right, if I get lost, or especially if he should die, then he wants the get to take effect. So therefore, that's his intention, and unlike this case where his intention was, yes, he wants to come back within 30 days because he wants to argue his case, and he only said that just to pacify the others, but if it's beyond his control, he certainly did not want the condition to be triggered and lose his right to use the documents in his favor. Okay, good. So Rava answered that question very well. And now we ask Rava from yet another case. Ma shenamahu de amar lehu ila atena mikan ad telatin yomin leheve gita. A person says, listen, if I don't come back within 30 days, this is your get. I'm giving it to you from now, but it will only take effect if I do not return in 30 days. Okay, now, after on the 30th day, ata upesake ma'beda, he came, but there was a river preventing him from crossing, and he needed to get on the ferry to get to the other side in order to get home. Amar lehu chazudatai. He's on the other side of the river, and he just missed the last ferry of the day, and he's calling out, "Look, I'm here, right? I want to come back. I do not want the get to be valid, but it's obviously beyond his control, right? Because he missed the ferry." And so he wants to remain married. So what do? Do we take that into account? Shemuel says, sorry, you didn't come back, right? You could be there waving and screaming that you want to come back, but you did not actually cross the river and come back home. And so, therefore, sorry, this condition is fulfilled and the get is valid. Okay, so we know that law. We ask Rava, Amai beha menas anis. In this case, isn't it obvious that his circumstances beyond his control? So how come Rava, you, in the case of the court, where he doesn't come back, could be the very same instance that he missed the ferry, and he's saying, but I'm here, I want to come to the court. And Rava, you said, we take the onus into account and we say it's okay, you can still use your documents. How come over here you wouldn't you agree? But yet Shemuel says that we do not take the onus into account, and sorry, he's divorced. So the answer is Dilma unsa de migalia shane umabera migle unse. We answer for Rava that perhaps an ones that is revealed is different, meaning a circumstance beyond one's control that is somewhat predictable is different from one that's completely unpredictable. And the ferry coming late is something that happens all the time, and even though it's beyond one's control, you have to keep that in mind, that the ferry might leave early or might come late, and you'll miss the deadline. And therefore, in the case of the get, where he missed the ferry, he should have had that in mind when he said, if I don't come back before 30 days, he could have added a stipulation, and including if I'm late to the ferry, that's considered as if I'm coming back, because it's something that happens relatively often. So he should have had that in mind. And if he didn't add any stipulation, then that means that he's including that circumstance, and saying, if I don't come back, even if it's because of, he should have had in mind, even if he misses the ferry, that will also be called not coming back. So he should have included that in his calculation. And therefore, if he doesn't come back, even if it's because of the ferry, that's not totally beyond his control. And therefore, we assume he means for the condition to still be triggered and for the get to be good. Whereas in the case of the court, it doesn't say exactly what the circumstance is, but we assume it's something more serious. And, he was captured by pirates, and so that's why he was not able to come back. That is an ones that is not megalia, that is not apparent. You would not have thought of that. You would not have taken that into account. If you ask him, if you were captured by pirates, did you want your condition to be fulfilled? He would say, for sure not. All right, I really wanted to come back. I wanted to finish my court case. It was something totally beyond one's control, and that would account, Rava can account for the difference. And he may very well agree with Shemuel that in the case of the get, we say sorry, right? Your honest doesn't count because it's not a very rare circumstance. Whereas when it is a more rare circumstance, that's when Rava says it's okay. It was beyond your control. You can still come to court and still use your documents. Okay, so now we finished the challenges against Rava, and now we're going to turn to Rav Huna. He's the one that said that when he doesn't come back in 30 days, even though it was beyond his control, we say sorry, right? You said that you're going to give up your right to use the documents, and you didn't come, so therefore you lost the case. You cannot use your documents anymore. So we ask, Rav Huna, mikidi asmachtahi, vasmachta la kanya. We have a concept very important called asmachta. Asmachta is when you agree to something, but inconclusively. In your mind, you think that this is something that's going to happen so rarely, it's not going to happen, and you don't give your full mind to the agreement. For example, if you rent a car and the car has to be back at 5 p.m. and you're just going on a very quick trip, and you say, for sure I'll be back way before, and there's a penalty. If you don't bring the car back by 5 p.m., you're going to have to pay $10,000. So you agreed to it because you're thinking there's no way I'm going to be late. But then turns out traffic jam and you come at 5:02. And they say you have to pay $10,000. That's called asmachta. He can come to court and say, listen, when I agreed to that $10,000, I didn't really agree because I never expected that that would be triggered. So it was not a full agreement, and therefore I never really transferred over my obligation to pay you. So that's asmachta la kanya. A very important application of this is gambling. According to many poskim, gambling is stealing, because if I'm sitting down to play poker, I'm expecting to win. And otherwise, why would I sit down to play? And now, we're using chips, and turns out I lose $1,000. And so now I have to take money out of my pocket and pay the other guy. He's demanding it. But I feel like he's stealing from me because when I sat down to play, I didn't have in my mind, so it's, if he wins, I'll gladly give him $1,000. I was expecting to win, and therefore this is only asmachta. And says I never really transferred that to you when I gave you those poker chips. When I put the poker chips in the middle, I was not really having in mind that I was going to give over that money actually, and therefore when you force me to pay you, it would be stealing. Of course, the loser doesn't steal. Only the winner violates stealing as a gambler. So if you gamble but you lose, then you're still okay. Okay, so that's an important example of asmachta. And so here too, doesn't Rav Huna agree that this would be an asmachta because the person in the court case, he fully expects that he's going to come back. And so he never really agreed to give up his right over the land. Let's say it's a land dispute. And he never fully agreed to give up the land dispute or his access to those documents. And the basic principle is asmachta is not a transfer. So he should still have a right to that land and to argue his case. So we answer, Rav Huna answers, Shanehacha demit pesan zechuta. Now here it's different because the court is holding on to his documents. Since he transferred the documents to the court, that act shows that he's serious about it. He knows what he's doing. He knows that if he doesn't come back in 30 days, the court can just rip up those documents. And so by handing it over, he's actively doing something to show his full agreement. And so therefore it's not an asmachta. It would be kind of like in my car example, if when I rented the car, I gave them a check for $10,000 and so if I don't come back, then you can take the check, right? Or for gambling, there are some poskim say that if you don't use chips, but you take out all the cash to begin with and give it over to someone to hold, so then you totally agree because you gave up the money to begin with, and then you'll see if you win it back. Then that, according to some, that could be a way out of getting around the stealing part of gambling, or although there's still other problems, halachic problems regarding gambling. Okay, so here too, Rav Huna will say it's different. This is not asmachta because he willingly gave the documents to the court, and that showed that he's totally serious about them voiding these documents if he doesn't come back. And now we ask, hold on, just because he gave up the documents and so they're being held by someone else, is that not called asmachta? Look at this Mishnah in Baba Batra. V'hatenan. Mi shepara miksat chovo v'shlish et shtaro. Someone, I owe you $100. I paid $40, but I still owe you $60. Now, normally the lender is the one that holds a document that says it's an IOU, right? The lender is holding it, and he can produce it any time. It says, right, that I owe you the $100. So now that I paid $40 of it, so I don't want you to hold on to that IOU because then you could bring it again and make me pay another $100. So normally you would keep the IOU and you'd write to me a receipt for the $40. But that's a pain. We have to go find some paper and a pen and someone who knows how to write, and so all that. So instead we have an agreement. We say, listen, take the IOU, give it to our friend Mr. A that we both trust. He'll hold on to it. And I say, Ve'amarim en ani noten lo mikan ad sheloshim yom ten lo shetaro. I tell Mr. A that I'm going to pay back the rest of the $60 from now before 30 days. If I don't pay back the $60 before 30 days, then Mr. A, you can give the lender back the IOU. And that way he'll be able to use it, and actually he'll be able to extract the full 100 all over again, and then they'll have to pay the full 100. But I'm okay with that, right? So if we make that agreement, so what will be the consequences if I don't pay? The time came and I never paid the rest of the $60. So should Mr. A give over that IOU back to the lender? Rabbi Yosef Omed Yiten. Rabbi Yosef says yes, give it, right? Because that was the condition. That's exactly what I told him. So I agreed to, if I don't pay the $60 before 30 days, I agree that he'll have the IOU and then he can produce it and I'll have to pay of the full 100. That first $40 I'll have to pay again. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, do not give it, because I never intended that I would have to pay again. I was just saying, listen, don't worry, I'm going to pay. But even though I gave my document over to a third party, and that third party is holding it, it's our document, right? It's the IOU. And even though I agreed for a third party to hold a document that is against me, nevertheless, it's still called asmachta, that I never fully agreed that if I don't pay before the $60 before 30 days, I didn't really have in mind that that would happen, and therefore I did not fully agree in my mind that I would be willing to pay the 100 all over again because you'd give the document back. So we see from here that even though the documents is in the third party, it is according to the Yehuda, it is still called, it is an asmachta, and that is a good excuse, and you don't give it back. Now, this is a machloket, so which one do we follow, the Biyoseh or the Yehuda? Well, V'amar Rav Nachman, Amar Abba bar Abu, Amar Rav, and halacha ke the Biyoseh, Amar asmachta kanya. Right, Rav said that we do not follow the Biyoseh, therefore we do follow, we do not follow the Biyoseh, who says, this is an asmachta, but asmachta is a good kinyan. So actually, even the Biyoseh agrees that this is a case of asmachta, but that I never fully agreed. But even though I never fully agreed, nevertheless, it is an acquisition, and so therefore I'm gonna have to pay it again. But Rabbi Yehuda says that it's not an asmachta at all. Or asmachta lo kanya, and so I don't have to pay I don't give it back. Mr. A does not give it to him, and I'm not going to have to pay the $40 again to the lender. And so now we come back to our challenge. You see that this is not a good answer to the first question. The fact that that in the court case I gave the documents, handed them over to the Bet Din. That doesn't mean that I was very serious about it, because in the case of the lender, even though I agreed for the IU to be in the hands of the third party, that still doesn't mean, according to the Yehuda, that I agreed to it. That's still called asmachta, and therefore asmachta lo kanya, and so giving it into the hands of the third party does not prove anything, and therefore back to here we reignite the question against Rav Huna: isn't this an asmachta? And I never really agreed, I never really thought in my mind to agree that I would give up my right to my documents to the court and give up my right to my claim on the land that we're arguing over. So how's Rav Huna going to respond to that? And his final answer is Shanehacha damar li batalan zachavate. The case of the court is actually different because he said that he wants his merits to be voided. Basically saying, these documents, I'm agreeing to void the documents and give up my claim altogether. And so this is very emphatic. Perhaps in his own mind, he didn't think he had such a great case. And so that's why he said, take them. If I don't come back in 30 days, it probably means he couldn't find any more evidence, and he's not so serious about his claim in the first place. So over there, we actually assume that it's not an asmachta, right? Because he said, you can take them and void my documents. So he's voiding his whole claim to begin with. It's not really a whole transfer. He's not transferring money to someone or giving someone else, giving someone something that he had before, but rather he's just voiding his documents. And so we assume that that is not an asmachta. He did that with full knowledge that he's just going to give up the case if he doesn't come back before 30 days. Whereas in the case of the payment, nobody wants to pay twice something that they already paid, and so he's just saying that as a way of saying, just give me more time. I need 30 days, but he never in his mind really agreed. And so the difference is not really about the handing over the document. In both cases, he handed it over and he put it in the hands of a third party, but nevertheless, the circumstances of actually making a transfer and what he had in mind are different. Okay, and bottom line, Hilcheta asmachta kanya. In the end, even though we were just arguing for the position that asmachta la kanya, but the halacha actually is that an asmachta does make a transaction. So even if I didn't have full mind to make a transfer, nevertheless I would still have to pay. But that's only if there's no circumstances beyond one's control. But if it was beyond my control, I really tried to come back and I was not able to, I really tried to pay and was not able to, then that asmachta does not count. And last condition, and this would only apply if it was an eminent betin, right? Not just three people that happened to come together and I gave them over these documents and I said, listen, you can nullify these documents. If it's just three guys off the street, just a plain old betin, then I did not really mean it. I was just saying it, and so that would not be considered. If I didn't come back, that would not be considered a breaking of the condition, and I could still use them. But if I do it in front of an eminent bet din, well, then people are more serious when they're speaking in front of an important bet din, and so if they say that condition in front of an important bet din, then we assume that they really meant it. And if they really meant it, then that condition will be binding. That's the conclusion. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.